والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. يا ربنا نعتمد عليك ونتوجه إليك ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أنت الواحد وأنت الرحمن وأنت الرحيم. اغفر لنا ذنوبنا يا غفار يا غفور. اهدنا إلى طريقة الرشد والحق، وسهل علينا السلوك على الصراط المستقيم، وأرزقنا بحسن الخاتمة وأن نموت على الدين. I wanted to address the plight of the Muslim youth, specific in Minnesota. We've been seeing some very disturbing situations that transpire among the Muslim youth in Minnesota. Of course, not all of them, but there are some cases which are extremely problematic, to the level that it really prompts the necessity of the community to have a solid discussion on these types of situations which we see popping up in Minnesota, so that we can be supportive, but also so that we can take precaution, given that these types of things can take place anywhere. In my short time in Minnesota, I noticed that Minnesota has a number of positive qualities, and it also has a number of deficiencies. And of the positive qualities that it has is that it has a large number of Muslims that are concerned with the deen, and it has some environment in which at least you can access knowledge and you can build up a relationship to the Quran, and you can build up your practice of the deen. But at the same time, one of the most detrimental aspects of the culture of Minnesota, in that Minneapolis area, is that those are cultural hubs. And so you have a major disconnect between the communities and the youth. And so the institutions that represent the deen, many of them have a major disconnect from the situations of the youth, because the youth are growing up in that environment. And so there is a lot of issues which need to be paid attention to, which at times maybe people don't know how to deal with them, or maybe they're ignored, or there are serious issues when it comes to the issue of gangs, drugs, moral breakdown, youth being lost, getting into activities that are extremely problematic. And I've seen similar cases with some of the youth in Ohio that come from a similar background, and you just find that they get lost in the whole process of the culture of these urban environments, and they go to sometimes to extremes in how they deal with situations. Like sometimes it's just like over the top, and it's not over the top that you can just like turn your head. It's like over the top that you probably need to be going to jail, or you probably need to be going to some forced drug rehab program, or you need to get some psychological attention, or a number of different issues. And I just don't think that, I think this stuff is spilling out, unfortunately, because of the media and stuff, and I think that it's not properly addressed. And I think that spaces need to be created that are not focused on the doxy concept, the teaching the Quran, or any of that. It's just spaces in which the youth can go to where they are as they are. You just have to learn how to deal with them as they are, and then you build them up from there. I think it's extremely problematic to try to inject this religious conformity upon youth that are pretty much gone. Yeah, they're just not there. Some of the activities that the youth are engaging in, criminal activities and self-destructive activities, it's just, we're seeing more and more testimonies of that. So you need people that are really focused on kind of like, being creative in addressing their situation. And that's the second point. We already mentioned the issue of space for these youth. There's not enough spaces for these youth. That's part of the problem. And so, they're being lost into that whole culture that's there, whether it's that gang culture or that street culture or drug culture and all that type of stuff. And so, you need people that can deal with those realities. They can deal with the drug element. They can deal with the gang element. They can deal with the cultural displacement. They can deal with the issues of, mentoring these young children and youth and young adults, and they can mentor them so that they can navigate in these environments. It comes with a certain type of preparation. These are extremely at-risk youth. Some of them are beyond that risk. They are on the other side now. And so, you have to have people that know how to deal with that. That's the bottom line. We have to be very open about drug counseling. We have to be very open about disease management, sexually transmitted disease management. We have to be very open about how you're going to deal with these youth that in reality, they're not going to be responsive to the Quran. They're not going to be responsive to you talking to them about Tawheed. They're not going to be responsive to a lot of that approach to Dawah. If that was the case, you wouldn't see what you see. But what they're looking for many times, and if you listen closely, they're looking for someone that they can latch onto that's not necessarily going to judge them, but is going to help them in the process. Because the community already has probably written them off. Sometimes their families may have written them off. And so, that takes a certain attitude. And there was a discussion. I was privy to some of that discussion. I didn't stay in the whole mix within specifically the whole concept of transforming the duksi or the madrasa type style of education that they have there, so that it can be more well-rounded. And that may need to be the case. That may need to be the case that, there's some phenomena that's there in that environment which is pushing youth outside of the circle of the Muslim community. And we mentioned some issues, but we mentioned some issues like being disconnected, feeling alienated, being in these rough environments because of poverty and all that. And so, the issue comes back down to having people that are really analyzing the problems as well. That's extremely important, to analyze the problems. So there has to be conversations, and these conversations have to take place. They have to get back to the mashaykh, to the imams, to the parents, about what the issues really are, the organizations that are there. And there has to be a community dialogue. And you have to put forward the money to bring in the people or to train the people, that can handle these situations, because you have a crisis on your hands. The situation of these youth is extremely problematic. Violence, drugs, gangs, criminality. And again, we're not saying that all of the youth are in that position, because I know that all of them are not. But there's enough that it's worrisome. And so that's a basic outline. You need space. You need to start thinking out of the box. You need to back away a little bit from just religious conformity to start dealing with people where they're at. Just like the man who killed 99 men, you were dealing with a person that was extremely broken down. They need practical advice for how to be able to move. Because a lot of these youth, they really want to, I don't think a lot of them would like to stay in these situations, especially when they have to pay the penalty for some of the things that they have done. And I've seen that. I had 2 youth from that community, but from that tribal community, so to speak, that I dealt with when I was in working with youth that were incarcerated. And, these youth, they get caught up. That's not to excuse them for any bad behavior, but some of them just get caught up. And so they're reachable, and some of them are not. But we need to be able to determine who's reachable, who's not reachable. And so that's going to take a different type of orientation. That's going to take a different type of orientation, being more involved on a deeper level. Even being involved in, assisting at the grassroots level in a cooperative, independent way of identifying these youth. I know that, in particular in Chicago, for a while they had the interrupters, and some Muslims were involved in that. And the interrupters were recognized people that were qualified, that will break up gang violence, and they were, kind of effective in that. And so you need people to be able to have that type of mentality, to be able to identify these youth, when they seem to be far gone. And then you need people to be able to counsel and people to be able to work with them and deal with them. And that means that you need space and you need programming that's geared towards that. That's separate from any idea of memorizing the Quran or talking about deen or anything. Because this is, a situation which is beyond that. You're trying to rescue people from, being immersed in unbelief from our youth. They may not be at the level of kufr, but their actions are definitely acts that, embody the values of kufr. Whether it's, imbibing drugs, or whether it's, domestic violence towards other youth, or relationships, and whether it's gang activity, all of that. I don't want to continue with this reflection any more than this, other than to say that you have to have some sort of strategy, of how you're going to outline this stuff. And I think that there's a number of people that have ideas about this and even background that can be consulted, but you can't afford to leave the situation as it is. It's an obligation to deal with these youth and try to retrieve them from these situations before they're just so far gone that they're, irreparable, so to speak. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.